when we look at, just a second. Sorry, it's too many hands. I need an extra hand here. We also need to look at what age is appropriate. So typically for most kids, middle school is going to be when a smartphone is something that needs to become part of their life. Why? Because this is the age where kids should be able to be dropped off and stay somewhere for a couple of hours or be with other friends. And it starts to become the time where you want to know where they are, if the plans change, etc. And it can be very convenient. But also, this is when kids are most stupid. Their brains are not developing well and they're very impulsive. And so our recommendation is that what you need to do is have these difficult conversations. And I made a list of questions in the handout that you can use as a guide to create conversations with your tweens and your teens about their phone usage. And also we see that when parents are specific about what they expect, their children are more likely to follow that, even if they complain about it. So if you don't want your kids to use drugs, you need to be clear, we don't think it's good for you to smoke weed or drink alcohol when you're underage, as opposed to not mentioning it. So it helps to be clear. We expect that you will never sext. And then also you need to set supervision. And so particularly with tweens, you want to be the one who gets on the phone before they have it. You set the password. You set the security controls and you make it so they can't surf for things they shouldn't be surfing for. And every smart kid I've seen always has a really good excuse which you need to ignore, which is, well, Mom, I won't be able to do research at school because when you do that, you can't get to anything because there's mature content like on Wikipedia or Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever. And that's where you just need to look at them and say, sorry, this is how we're doing it. And you need to think of it this way. In school, this is what they do. If you surf the wrong thing, then you lose the privilege. And you need to be the parent that's willing to shut off the phone or take away the phone when they abuse the privilege. And that actually is the best way for your kid to learn, is by doing. And so we recommend that up until about the junior year, you probably should have some security settings where you have some control so that mature content is not easily accessible. Unfortunately, the more digitally skilled your kid gets, the more likely they are to get around that, but at least make them work for it, okay? And then you need to be willing to check a nose into things and find out what's going on. And then also, you need to show interest in their world. And this is one thing that you have to realize is that this is part of their world. And it is part of how they connect with other people. And so you want to at least know what a Snapchat is, or Instagram, or whatever the current platform is that kids are using, and realize what part of it is. You don't have to have an account yourself in order to understand it. Most kids are willing to tell you if you ask them and say, hey, can you just explain to me, what's Instagram? What do you do on it? What do you like about it? And have a positive conversation about what do you like about it? What do you think are its limitations? And what we see is if you really want kids to learn, you have to make them think. And that means if you're a good parent, you ask way more questions than you do giving information. And so whenever my kids, I have 5 kids total, 3 acquired by marriage, if I want to get them to think, I don't tell them what I want them to think. I start asking open-ended questions about it. So how come you think that college is better, Sarah? I noticed it's the same one that your best friend applied to, and before she did, you were telling about this other school. What did you like about that? Did your friend tell you anything that made you see something new and positive about this place? How do you think that will help you when you're getting your nursing job, and et cetera, as opposed to saying like, wait a minute, you can't just go to a school because your best friend is there, okay? Another thing is, you need to look at how can you create opportunities for learning, okay? And that means you've got to give your kids some wiggle room. And you have to let them practice and make mistakes. And one of the things that you need to think of is, okay, How do I want my child to use their phone or their tablet? What do I have in mind? And then what do I need to do to set that up? So if you have someone who is an ardent video gamer and they're not so ardent about homework, then you may need to keep the controller until all the homework is done. If you want your kid to sleep, you may need to turn off the modem and the Wi-Fi an hour before bedtime, even when your kid tells you, but I'm not finished with my homework. Well, what they'll learn is how to be more organized. And this is where I've seen a lot of kids snooker their parents, is by claiming they need more homework. And then, of course, what they're doing is they're FaceTiming someone while they're kind of chatting and sort of doing homework. And then the other thing is, I recommend that you always be able to see what your child is doing online. So the door has to be open, or they're in a public area, and they can't get in that secluded place, because the truth is, when we look at kids who have been victims of sexual predation or who are getting into content they shouldn't be, no one knows it because no one is looking over their shoulder. And so one rule I have in my house is you have to be in the open, or your door has to be open. And if you want your door shut, then that means you shouldn't be using it. And, because the idea is you ought to be able to share whatever the content is with a parent and not feel embarrassed about it. Another thing is I want to empower you. Because one thing I see with a lot of parents is they feel like they're at a disadvantage because they are not as digitally literate. And I most certainly am not digitally literate. When something breaks down, I call my children and they come and fix it. So I know that that's difference. What I do want to tell you is you are older and wiser. And you're more skilled at relationships. And you're the one that can help curate the environment that your child is being raised in. And you don't have to be able to use all these things in order to have the important conversations with your children that you need to have. The other thing that you're going to need to do is to view bullying and digital meanness as an opportunity for emotional growth. What we know is that 80% of 7th graders engage in bullying behavior, and now a lot of that is online. Okay, so that means your kids are probably doing it as well as receiving it. The dilemma is we see that some kids are uniquely, at risk for taking this in a terrible direction in terms of their mental health. And the message you want to give your kids is, one, let's expect that this will happen. And instead of painting it as something terrible, you want to say, it's bad social skills and it's shameful for that other person. It's not your shame, it's their shame that they did that. What kind of person would do that? And you make it not about your kid. And then the other thing that you can do, and research has proven this, is if your kid receives an insult, an ugly meme, a Photoshop picture that makes them look particularly awful, you want to ask them this question. Do you believe it? Do you think that really reflects you? And your kid's probably going to say the right answer, which is no. And then you know what your response should be? Good. And then you leave it at that. And do you know why that works? It shows your opinion of yourself is what matters, not these other people. And I trust you to have good judgment about yourself, and I know what the truth is. We see that when parents do this overly anxious, oh my God, that's terrible, it's awful, I can't believe that, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so wonderful, you're so handsome, you're not really fat, you're not really ugly, everybody has braces, whatever it is. You just showed them this is a very anxiety-provoking event, and it really is awful that someone insulted you. And you just disempowered them. And so as hard as it is when other kids hurt our children, we need to teach them how to be tough. And we need to teach them to stand up for their own sense of themselves, their self-worth, okay? Self-esteem is I get everybody to compliment me. Self-worth is I know who I am, and I'm proud of that, whether or not anybody else knows it. And so you want to talk that way, and you have to have those conversations before they get on social media to tell them this is going to happen to you. And then you also tell them, and if I ever catch you doing it, it's time out on the phone or the tablet. Because this is shameful behavior when you criticize and show contempt and try to take dignity away from other people. And so that would be one very, very helpful piece of advice that I would give. And I can tell you from working with kids where they have had this happen in the school and other people have treated it like it's the highest grade trauma ever. The kid has been so relieved when I start talking to them this way and I start using a self-worth building approach. And then oftentimes they'll say, well, I felt bad, but I just felt so much worse when my mom started crying or my dad started crying. And so it means you're gonna have to save your tears for your friends about what's happening to your kids, but be the version of the Marine Master Sergeant who gets them through the battle. And so let me give you an example of that. So if you're in a battle, you have a Master Sergeant, and this person is the one responsible for helping you to use your weapons and get out alive. And if we have the attachment parenting style sergeant, it would sound like this. Oh my God, that weapon was so bad. I'm so scared. Oh God, everybody wets their pants the first time in battle. It's okay, don't feel bad, dude. And here, let's hug each other. Oh God, we might die, okay? All right? How about the effective Master Sergeant? What they're gonna say is, get the pin out of your grenade and throw it. Aim your weapon and fire it. And then afterwards, you debrief about the battle. The thing that our kids need from us is to show we have faith in you that you can cope. We know you're gonna cope, and that helps bring out the better person in our child. And we need to approach digital media the same way, which is, I expect you to learn how to do this, I have faith that you will learn how to do this, and I'm gonna help you how to do it, and when you screw up, I'm gonna give you consequences just like I would for any other screw up. And that means you've gotta pay attention. So I wanna say thank you for your attention, and what I hope